You ready?
Yeah. You'll never know just how much I miss you. You'll never know just how much I care. If I tried, I still couldn't hide my love for you. You ought to know, for haven't I told you so a million or more times? You went away and my heart went with you. I speak your name in my every prayer. If there is some way to prove that I love you, I swear I don't know how. You'll never know if you don't went away and my heart went with I speak your name in my every prayer. If there is some way to prove that I love you, I swear I don't know how. You'll never know if you don't
That's a good one.
Well, hello, Beach. How you doing?
I'm good, Monica. How are you?
You know, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I've got a little vino here. Cheers.
Yeah, I've got a cheers.
And yeah, I'm doing fine. It was a beautiful day. We're recording this in October, and it feels like just a beautiful fall day. So happy.
We had a little
Happy,
sunshine.
happy.
earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's nice to have a little sun. Hopefully, whenever this airs, the weather's still
hmm
doable. But so we opened with that was really okay. When the pandemic first started, I don't know if you remember this, but we were less than a month in, I think,
hmm
and we weren't doing anything like this yet. But and I've always loved the song "You'll Never Know." I've known it since I was a kid, and never sung it before, never performed it, anything like that. But I kept thinking about it, and remember I came to you and I said, "Can we just sit down and
Sure.
record this?" And if it was
Yeah.
good,
I do.
I said, we'll put it out. And we did it once. We just sat down and did it once. I'm like, let's just leave it, And it felt like the right thing. Everybody was away from their family. Everyone was really shut down. And I don't know, the lyric and everything felt so,
hmm
it was poignant. It's still poignant, but even worse at the time. And then a few weeks later, Jeff Steinberg, it's been my dream for probably a decade now to record with Jeff and have Steinberg strings orchestrations on a record. And all of a sudden, I get this email, and all it has in the subject line is "a gift for you." And he took that recording and he put strings behind it, and we cried. I cried. I just thought
beautiful. Yeah.
It meant so much. So
he's the string man. I've got several albums that he did that are just wonderful. He's a pianist, and that helps a lot. I think the best arrangers are pianists, and he always knows exactly what to put where.
Yeah,
to make you just want to go, oh, that's so beautiful every time.
That's what I did. I was oh my God, it's so beautiful. Anyway, so I have. He and George Tidwell is joining us tonight, our buddy.
Two of our favorite people.
Back. He's becoming an internet superstar sensation because of these happy hours.
He's got a collection of hats too. It's really working.
He does. And I do believe I saw him wearing a hat for us. So should we bring him on?
Absolutely.
Okay. You want to say anything so I can bring them on? A little introduction?
Well, they're best friends. We're going to explore that, how they met. And both of them are very dear to me. And George and I go back a long way. And then we added Jeff to the mix when he came to town. So I think they'll have some stories that we'd like to hear.
Definitely. All right. Well, here is our friend George Tidwell. Hi, George.
How are you guys?
Greetings. Oh, he's got a hat on.
Yep.
The hat.
Good looking hat.
That is the sweetest story about Jeff and the strings, and that's so typical of Jeff to do
thing
like that.
That meant the world to me.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, let's talk about him too, his face, shall we?
Yes, please.
All right, here we go. Here's Jeff Steinberg. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, gang. How are you?
Hello. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers to you too.
And to you.
L'chaim, everybody.
Oh man.
Great. And good luck with the new system that you finally got.
I live out in the sticks, to say the least. Actually, as they say, the city limit signs on Leaper's Fork are on the same post. But I've been out here about 10 years, and have had nothing but DSL internet or internet speed. So it's really been archaic. So they finally had installed some technology out here. So now we have some high-speed internet, which is why I can do this show, because otherwise I couldn't. So it's nice to be here. And I was thinking about this afternoon. The reason that we're here doing what we're doing here tonight, one of the major reasons is because of the space program from the late 50s. If you want to think of it in those terms, all the money we put into the space program enabled all of this technology.
That's cool.
That's
I
true.
hadn't thought that.
All this computer chip and motherboards and all the things that came out of NASA. And I remember I was living in Detroit. I've been here for 40 years, by the way. You mentioned me coming into the mix. It's 40 years this year, and
Wow.
but I remember I lived in Detroit before I moved here for 8 years, and that was 1972. And in 72 or 73, I was kind of getting into the recording scene, and there was a guy he was a wealthy guy who owned a couple of bars and a bowling alley, but he was also an audiophile. He loved music and recording. So he built a recording studio, which everybody started to use because he had all the latest stuff because he could afford it. But that was during the transition from 8-track to 16-track. He had the first 16 multi-track 16 recorder, 3M recorder in the city of Detroit. So everybody was working his studio. But he had a digital watch, with just the time on it. I mean, he had everything when it first came out. A long-winded way of saying that thank God for the space program.
Yeah.
I don't have any big technical connection to it, but I can say that my sweatpants are held up by Velcro, and I guess that's kind of my connection to it.
Do you know where Velcro came from?
Yeah, it's a space thing. That's my space thing.
Well, part of it was the original was a guy, I think he was German or Italian or something, that was hunting in the woods, and he was getting burrs on his jacket.
Yeah.
And he took them home and tried to figure out what the deal was. And under a microscope, you could see they were locking in together.
How cool! I never heard
and
that.
So that was the primitive one, and then it went to the space program.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's great.
We have a friend who named her cat Velcro. Right?
Does the cat stick to her sweater when she goes?
It was Ellen. It's Ellen.
Oh, Ellen.
The cat? It was Velcro, wasn't it? I got that right.
It was Velcro. That's right. I forgot.
I think that's the funniest name for a cat. It was great.
Yeah.
Velcro.
Well, he stayed close.
He did.
Good. Hey, Jeff, kind of apropos of your 16 tracks story, that makes me think. In 1963, I guess it was, I went to New York City with the great Bill Justice, arranger and producer. He took me along because he was a wonderful person, but theoretically I went along as his copyist and associate.
Oh.
And we met with Connie Francis, who at that time was a huge star. We went to her office, and then we went to Mercury because the project was going to be on Mercury. We went to the Mercury recording studios, and there was nobody there but us. Somebody met us, and the A&R man, good grief, I can't remember his name. He was one of the real characters around here. Anyway, we got in there, we looked around, we looked at everything, and then the guy said, in kind of a hushed tone, "You want to see something special?" And so we thought, who could resist that, Okay. So he took us over to a little door just to the left side of the studio door, which was locked. And he unlocked it with the key, and we opened the door, and there was something under a big gray tarp.
Uh-oh.
And
that sounds like a 50s movie.
So he pulled the tarp aside, and it was a 16-track recorder.
Ooh.
And which was undreamed of at that time. So we somehow felt we were in on the beginning of something. Then we came back to Nashville and worked with 4 tracks again for a while.
But you cut it live, so nobody cared, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I remember when they first came out or were coming out, and people would talk about it, and I would think, because I had a Wallensack that had 2 tracks.
Yeah.
And then they had 4 later on, and I thought that was, the end. And everybody was just kind of open-mouthed at the 16. It's like, how could they ever do 16? We've got 8 tracks. And now it's 32 and 64 and
endless, yeah.
Endless, all that stuff.
Well,
it's a funny world and a funny business to be in.
It is indeed.
It kind of feels like hell has frozen over when I have the capability of mixing anything on my computer. I shouldn't have that capability. I don't know how to do it. I'm doing it, but I don't know how to do it.
Oh,
So,
Yeah, that was part of what you studied in college, production.
oh, I was a radio TV film major, but everything I did was live or on tape. So I was really good at taping,
Splicing.
splicing, yeah. But
That was fun. It's like
you
paper.
didn't do anything digital. So I had no idea how to do any of this. I was mixing VHS tapes and all kinds of random stuff. It was awful.
but you're doing great with it, and with
Oh, yeah.
editing these shows,
Keeps me sane, George.
you're doing great.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a question I was asking BG, and I told her, I said, if you know the answer to this, don't tell me because I want to keep this fresh. How did you two meet? You and George and Jeff. How did you two meet?
Well, I remember the first time I saw George. We didn't meet this night, I don't think.
At Blair, eh?
No, I was in Nashville for a couple of months. I had just gotten into town. I was just making the rounds to see what's going on in town, and I happened to go to Wind in the Willows,
Oh
Oh,
God.
yeah.
which
I used to
or
play there.
Yeah.
it was a little club. I forgot. Oh, it was near Jimmy Kelly's. It was in that area. I forgot what that street is, but
Mhm.
anyway, just a little place, and they had jazz there regularly. So I went in, and we sat down, and they started this set, and it was George Tidwell, and I guess it was Bob Mader playing drums, or
Yeah.
some. I don't.
Yeah.
It was probably Kenny
Yeah.
Malone. I think it was Kenny Malone,
Good man.
and the bass player escapes me, but playing piano was Randy Goodrum.
Right.
And
They still might have
they
been.
played a couple of tunes, and I said, "Man, I made the right choice. I moved to the right town. I'm going to work with these guys."
I so do remember that.
I don't know if we actually met that night, or I may have said something to you, but we probably did some sessions or something soon after that. And
Well, once we officially met, we to say that we hit it off immediately would be a huge
Oh, yeah.
understatement.
Hmm.
We are. I'm Costello to his Abbott, sort of.
Oh,
So I
no.
think that's how I met Jeff, is through you,
Yeah.
probably.
I think so.
And yeah, I can't remember when it was, but I just
Well,
remember.
a couple
all of a
things.
sudden you were there.
First of all, there was a lot of music going on then. There was a lot of people
Oh,
out
yeah.
playing in clubs. There was a lot of things happening. Plus, we used to all have parties. There used to be parties like every 3 months. Somebody used to have Christmas party, Easter party,
Yeah.
4th of July. We played softball. Remember the softball game?
Oh yeah, I was thinking
So-
about that today.
The music community used to get together other than musical activities. So everybody was, pretty much
Yeah,
keeping in touch. So, and that was a good way to meet everybody too.
sure.
It was.
Jeff, are you
was.
suggesting we start a softball league? Is that a subtle hint?
My hips won't take that anymore.
Mine either.
Those were that was a fun thing for a couple of years though too.
It was. We
It
all
was.
broke our fingers and got black eyes and
Oh, yeah.
twisted ankles. It was great.
And I actually used to cook and for
You did,
parties
and
and
you're a
stuff.
good cook.
You did.
Gone are the days.
George
now.
Tidwell makes the world-class chocolate mousse.
Oh,
I could
You
make
have
it.
never had chocolate mousse in your life like George Tidwell.
Why? I'm
Fabulous.
Well,
Fabulous.
I never had your chocolate mousse before.
Well, those were the old days. Now I can barely do a chocolate squirrel.
A moose
No.
and a squirrel. Yeah.
but,
Actually, that's a good thing. I'm put that on my list of things to bring you guys when you're accepting company.
Okay.
A giant
Absolutely.
chocolate mousse.
Oh man.
Well, we are of the mindset that we accept company when the doctors have an antidote or a vaccine to
Right.
keep everyone safe. So
Yep.
it might be a little while, but
That's all right.
we-
I'll
we-
make. Go ahead. Sorry.
I say we can always do mutual drop-offs and
Yes,
wave
we
at each
could.
other through windows too.
Yes, we could. Well, I will go on record as saying having Jeff added to the mix here musically, of course, is just
oh, yeah.
there's no way to say how much contribution he's made. But for me, as a person, having a fantastic friend What a break! What a lucky break for
Oh,
me.
yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. It's mutual. It is mutual. We just happen to hit it off. I think we're,
We did.
the brothers from two different mothers or
We
something.
were.
It's
Yeah.
two
And I just,
musicians that are compatible. That's why all
Yeah.
of us are friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
when you first did the first album with me and my trio, it was mid to late 90s. And it was called I'll Take Romance.
Great album.
And I love the way he works because he lets me play with the trio with our changes, and then he works around them. I've played with a lot of conductors and arrangers that say, here, play this. And a lot of times they don't really know how to guide the bass player for things, or
Right.
you tell the drummer what they want because they're not that kind of musician. And but Jeff is like, he just blends into the whole mix. And so we played that probably in 1997 or 8. And that album is still selling. It's one of our.
oh, it was 2001. That
Was it 2001?
Yeah, that's
September
right.
11th.
Right, because I remember I had sinus surgery and I had bandages all over me.
That is one of my favorite
It's
Beegie
a
albums.
wonderful album for all of us.
Was that the album that we were cutting the rhythm tracks on 9/11?
Yes,
Yeah.
Oh man, what a day that was.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you guys made the right choice though to make the music on that day.
You know, Roger said, I wrote in the liner notes, our producer, Greg, said, write some liner notes. And I said, I don't know what to say because it was the day of.
Yeah.
We'd gotten there, and then the second tower fell. And then we just sat, And finally, Roger said, if we don't play, they win. Let's go make some music and it'll cheer us up.
Yeah.
And we did. And
Yeah, it was
we went
beautiful.
and got Chinese food at lunch because we were just looking for anything that would make us feel better.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of work that day. And so I was agonizing over writing the liner notes. And I went back and looked at Walt Whitman and the Civil War and all these things that you're supposed to know when some cataclysmic thing happens. And Billy came in, and I was just suffering over this thing, and he said, just tell it what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I wrote 2 paragraphs about how we decided to go ahead and play, and that would be our tribute to it. The music would be the tribute. And I got letters from all over the place for those words.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Actually, I have a sister story to that, and you, George, you probably remember this. In 1963, Woody Herman's band was in New York recording, and the news came across that John Kennedy had been shot.
Yeah.
Mm.
And right after there was during their session, and they went back and decided to go ahead and finish the date. The first chart they played after that was After You've Gone, that great Bill Holman chart.
Oh yeah.
Of After You've Gone. And if you go back and listen to it, the fire in that
Yeah.
and the emotion it was a notch or two above everything else that they were doing, which was great.
That's great.
But
Wow.
the arts are a great comfort to everybody.
And this unsettling times like this,
Exactly.
how could you? I mean, I can't get through the day without some music. And more, I like it to be the music of you guys, the people I love, my friends.
Yeah.
It's just comforting, very comforting. Before you leave the idea of that album, on the subject of Jeff always knowing what to do, on one of the I think there was maybe just a day of overdub session strings and stuff. But Jeff wrote a brass section of 2 French horns and me on flugelhorn. And it was all simple, not challenging, but it was so perfectly right for that. I mean, I guess it says how nice it was that I remember it so well. All these years later, it was just a really happy day of making music that was just right in the correct pocket.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So damn it, Jeff, thank you again. Wearing me out.
You know,
Right.
it occurs to me, I always talk about wanting to be a part of the musical conversation. And I would think as an arranger, I guess it would depend on when and how and what you're commissioned to do and what you're, writing, who or what you're writing for, but you want to feel a part of that musical conversation. So is it helpful when, like in this case, do you prefer to have the rhythm section already track things so you can feel like you're already a part of the conversation, or do you want to lead the conversation and have them come into your world after? What do you prefer?
Who are you talking to?
You.
Oh, me.
Actually, anyone.
First of all, I have to state overall, Monica, you are an incredible musician, first of all.
Yep.
I mean,
Yes.
Thank you.
BG, it goes without saying. George goes without saying. But you take a back seat to no one. Your musical instincts and your abilities are world class. Seriously.
Thank you.
Couldn't agree more.
You have to listen to her on our new Clifton Davis album with the trio.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
She's
yeah,
singing
yeah.
with him on, what's the name of it?
Two for the road.
Two for the Road.
Oh, that is such a
One of my
beautiful.
favorite
That's-
pieces
yeah.
of music in the world.
That's
That's
a
And
one
they
of
beautiful.
my
do a duet. It's
one
wonderful.
of my favorite tunes. But your albums on your own are fabulous. So that's first of all. Second of all, you're welcome. Your question was, I forgot your question.
Well,
Answer your question
I
again.
think I hadn't
What's
thought
that
about
for
it
North
from
Dakota?
I hadn't thought about it from your perspective of writing string orchestration.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
So, I go into something, I want to feel like I'm a part of the conversation. I don't want to be really out front. I want to feel like I'm with the band. And I wonder when you're writing, and for instance, like with the Beegie Adair Trio, the signature sound. So do you prefer to write to complement that sound, or do you prefer to have them come into your work of art? Do you prefer for them to come into your world, or do you like to go into theirs after they've tracked their rhythm
Actually,
section part?
I like both. I came of age musically in the late 60s. I was born in 47, but I was into it immediately. But through the mid and late 50s, and certainly into the early 60s, I grew up with, all the great, at that time, easy listening music. And there was a ton of great music that was recorded in that genre. And that also includes Esquivel and all those great things that were happening during the 60s.
Crazy stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I love Esquivel.
That was so good.
And my parents, my dad was not a musician. He loved music, and he was an incredibly good dancer. But my mother was a radio singer in Baltimore, where she grew
Wow,
up.
I never knew that.
Sure, in the early 40s, and she sang with a orchestra. They actually had a studio orchestra. This was a Baltimore radio station. But my point is that music was always in our house. So I grew up with all of those things that were happening: classical music, country music. I mean, Porter Wagoner was a huge popular act in the Washington, D.C. area where I grew up. But I just grew up with that. But I grew up with these sounds of, orchestras with, big bands and a rhythm section, or Boston pop style pop orchestra arrangements and those kind of things. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I've always been a devotee or I should say a proponent of live recording. I love the aspect of getting musicians together, preparing things for them, and having everybody be creative.
Gotcha.
At the same time, if the project permits. In the case of the Beegie Adair Trio, you really need the trio sound as the core of the project, and then build the orchestra around that, which I love doing as well, because I'm always inspired by what the trio is doing.
Right.
Yeah.
is a little more challenging from the standpoint of. I appreciate the compliment, BG, of me putting things in the right places, but when the places are obvious, that's where they go. That's where the things go.
Right.
It's not that I have a lot of choices. Oh, here's a space.
Yeah.
Let's fill that right there. But that I enjoy doing that. But my real love is simultaneous recording, and we've done it on a few things. I think.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, early in the mid '80s, '87, I think it was. I worked on a documentary film called "Sunflower in a Hothouse." It was a documentary about Red Grooms, the
I
the
remember
pop
that.
artist who's from Nashville, but he was living in New York.
That was
And
good.
I wrote it was a jazz score because it was all shot in New York. And BG, you played on it, George. I'm sure it was Dennis,
I'd forgotten about
probably Barry Green or Roger.
Roger
Bissell.
Bissell, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it was all the Nashville folks. We had a great time, and that was done all simultaneous, and that was great. I mean, I just love doing that. And the way things are recorded today, especially if you're on a budget. If you have a large budget is one thing. If you have a smaller budget that you have to work within, it's much easier to track and then overdub from the standpoint of control over what you have and fixing things that aren't exactly right. Because simultaneous recording, obviously, if you don't get it right, you have to stop and start over again. You can piece it together, but you can't go in and fix an out-of-tune oboe or something. It's difficult to do.
If
So from
such a thing should happen, you know.
Pardon me? Well, it doesn't happen in Nashville. I know that.
No,
It never
it doesn't.
happens here. But Nashville still, over the years, has had as much, if not more, simultaneous orchestra recording going on than a lot of towns. But the long-winded answer to your question, Monica, is I like both approaches.
Yeah.
But I love getting inspired by a given artist to do overdubs. You know, strings are it's kind of a challenge. If I conceive an arrangement with strings and a rhythm section, and let's say I would cut that arrangement and bring you in as the vocalist, Monica, having had rehearsal with the concept of what's going down, etc. You would be probably inspired by some of the things that are happening around you that you didn't hear before.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same way on my end. If you give me a copy of you singing with a trio, I'm inspired by what I hear, the interplay between you and the rhythm section. So it's it's an either or situation. But I'm happy just to get the telephone call. So
Which you can take live, you know.
you can that you can do in real time.
From a player standpoint, even though it's often more pressure packed, I love everybody there at the same time because that's given my advanced age for many years. That's all I did. Everybody was there, and that was at the core of a 3-hour session, 4 songs in Nashville.
Right.
Bam, bam, and not to say the quality was any lower, but just the people were. That's how it was set up.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was in the Cash show, because we went live every Thursday night and taped in front of an audience, and there was a 35-piece orchestra. And I don't think any of the stoppages that the producer had to do ever came from the orchestra. They usually came from somebody that missed their mark or, you know. And, but the ensemble was just great.
Yeah, and again, that was almost exclusively an orchestra full of people who had started out in that way, recording live.
Yep.
So it didn't seem like any big deal.
Gotta show up with your A game, ready to play.
Sure.
I love it.
You know, I've heard conductors that I've worked for here with other things say, I love to come to Nashville to do like Broadway shows that come here and things like that, because the orchestras I can get in Nashville are the best in the country.
Yeah, I've heard many of them say that.
Yeah.
And I hope it's better now, but sadly, for many decades, they were very surprised at that.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't even pretend that they had not expected it, but they were good enough to say, "This is great."
This is great. Yeah.
Well, I have a
heavy duty guys, you know, like Peter Matz and Jack Elliott, and
Yeah, they love to work here.
that worked in Hollywood all the time.
one of the things that's an interesting comment, BG, because one of the things I noticed when I first came to town is that the musicians here. This is the only town I've ever lived in or worked in musically where there was a spirit of helping people out in
Right.
general, helping in general.
Yeah.
I have never worried about anybody trying to steal my clients here,
Right.
and vice versa. I have never gone out and tried to steal somebody else's clients, which is my kind of credo anyway. But nobody here does that, number
Yeah.
one. The players in general, because of the amount of music they have played in different genres, mostly in recording, they know a lot about different styles of music,
Yeah.
and they understand it. And the people here really listened. They listen to what's going on around them.
Mhm.
Very few cities can you do a string date and have a really good take, and have one of the string players come up and said, "You need to do one more because at bar 17, there was
Right.
really something out of tune and whatever."
Wow. Yeah.
Right.
And a trumpet player, if something's out of tune, obviously you know it exactly at that moment.
Nowhere to hide.
That's right, exactly. But string section sometimes, it sounds okay because it kind of, it's kind of a mixture of sound and in actuality, when strings aren't playing exactly in tune with each other on a unison note, that's what makes it sound good. Is that little rub, and that's what. But my point is, that's been the general attitude of all the players here in Nashville, and that's why I think producers love to come in.
Yeah.
And I would say, with the kind of younger generation of players that are here now and doing a lot of work, that same spirit of, we're a team. How can I help you? What's going to make this easier?
Mhm.
I mean, that just pervades. I don't know if it's something in the water. I'm not sure, but
I think it's just Southern hospitality and the lack of ego.
maybe so. Yeah.
Check
Maybe
your
so.
ego at the door. I always tell my students.
Yeah. But
I'm
it's-
sorry. You first.
No, I was just going to say it is still a town full of people who pay attention to what's going on with the people around them.
Yeah. When I first came here to live, I was 23 and I was freelancing. And my father said, "You had a good job with a salary and now you're going to go and play stuff. How do you know you're going to get work?" And I said, I've watched it happen, but the people that hired me sometimes or caused me to be hired were other piano players.
Yeah.
Nobody was at odds with you. Everybody, and all the bass players knew each other, and all the guitar players knew each other. And if somebody was sick or whatever, somebody would sub for him. When Chuck Sanders had a really bad car wreck,
Yeah.
Jack Gregg, another bass player, did his work for 3 weeks and signed the time card
Yeah.
with Charles's name on it.
I've seen that happen many
Yeah.
times with people in distress.
Yeah, there was no enmity. Is that the
Yeah.
word?
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, after Hollywood sort of moved in and things had bigger budgets and stuff like that, Charlie McCoy initiated on a Sunday night in the fall a yearly barbecue, and it was all the musicians before 1980 who helped each other out.
The old folks at
And there were
home.
about 100 of us, and we'd gather at like a dining room somewhere in a restaurant. And after the nice meal, they would pass microphones around, and people would tell war stories about
Yeah.
things that happened. And the atmosphere changed after the bigger companies got a hold of a lot of the recording things, and there were $100,000 budgets, instead of just a trio and
Yeah.
something. And so there was a distinct crossover with that. And then electronics also had a lot to do with changing the system. But they still, I went to a birthday party last fall for one of the guitar players that I worked with 40 years ago. And everybody, 100 people were at his birthday party,
It's so great.
We all work together so much. Yeah, it is.
I think that spirit still pervades the town,
I think so.
big business or not,
Mhm.
I'm always grateful that I found all of you, and that my school of learning was through all of you and your mentality. This is nothing against anyone my age or coming into town at the same time.
Be careful, Monica.
But yes, I realized that. But my point is it hot in here? A little. No, there is truly an old school philosophy, and I am very proud to have learned it from you all. And that's how I carry myself on the gigs, how I prepare for gigs. I don't always behave myself, but when I do, it's because I'm thinking about everything I learned from you all. So,
well, that's much appreciated, and I think to echo what Jeff said, I think we all count you as a horizontally wonderful musician with all the rest of us.
Wait,
Wait, let me rethink that.
I think you might.
Let me rethink that.
George, don't tell everybody this is going out on the internet.
As
What I mean
as a
is-
follow-up to that question, who was it that taught you to misbehave? That's what I want.
Oh, that goes way, way back.
Okay,
That goes way back. I think it has something to do with my mom and a couple of friends growing up.
Well,
But you are
that Broadway stuff.
Yeah.
you're definitely an old, good, settled spirit in your young
Thanks.
holder, so to speak. Your spirit holder.
Yeah.
Spirit holder. Okay, I have a couple of George. Jeff, you may or may not appreciate this, but George is my wingman for I like just called keywords. And these aren't questions. Well, they weren't questions from him, but maybe I bring them to you as a question. Maybe I just say words and you laugh and tell me what comes to mind. But I love that he does this, and I want to know about your code words with Darren Tidwell.
What?
all the little things that Darren said when he was little that we continue to say.
There's the chuckle. I was waiting for it. So tell us about what that means. And George, you have to tell everyone who Darren Tidwell is.
Well, Darren is my son, who at one time was 4 and now is 43. But Jeff was a huge part of his upbringing. He loves Jeff to this day. But he.
Who doesn't?
But he. I don't want to be answering for Jeff, but maybe I can kind of prompt him. One example is, for some reason, which I can't remember, he was watching a show with Jeff and I in my den about piranha fish. And the fake piranha was attacking a fake person in the water. And Darren, in order to salve his fear about it, said to us, "That's just meat with a shirt, right?" Meaning, that's not a real person, right?
That's great.
So,
Darren was, he's a great musician, by the way. He's an excellent musician.
oh, he is, yeah.
And I met Darren when he was 1980,
Yeah,
81. He was, what, 3 or 4?
it was 3. Yeah,
Something like that.
3.
But precocious as the Dickens. I mean, this kid had a great sense of humor. He was just like a little George, basically.
He made us laugh so much.
And one of the funniest things I remember is George told me this. He said that for some particular happenstance, Darren learned to whistle and snap his fingers in the same week.
Oh,
And Jim and so I came over once, and Darren runs up to me and goes, Jeff, watch this.
And so, like
With
all
this
day
look
for
on
a
his
week,
face, like,
yeah, it was a big week for him.
oh, well, the small pleasures.
And
Yeah.
oh,
one year he was modeling his new school clothes for us, and he would go upstairs. Maybe he was 6 or something. He would go upstairs and put on a new outfit and come down and go up. He was just into that. And then when he got to the next to the last one, he came down and he said, "And last but not quite."
Well,
So
I'm telling you,
most of those things I have written, I've used as song titles.
Oh,
oh, that's
uh,
the
okay.
best song title you've ever come up with, in my opinion, was at one of the jazz writer nights at Belmont College years ago. And George used to put together these concerts and invite 5, 6, 7 writers to write some things for the concert. And it was great. That was great fun.
It was big fun, yeah.
But George wrote in the late 40s, when bebop was on the rise and the swing music industry was on the downslide. A lot of the bebop players were recording to get music out there, to get that genre kind of out in the street. And but they had not even low budgets; they had like donut budgets. I mean, nothing. So obviously they would come into the studio and they would just make up songs, and normally they would take a standard tune and use the chord changes and make up a melody to go with it, and that's where the rest is history, as they say. But well, Charlie Parker, I know, did a lot of those things.
Yeah. And,
During that period. But so during this writer's night, George wrote a great tune, using the changes of Stella by Starlight, which is a great set of changes, obviously a great song. But the title of that tune was Blanche's Sister Outside at Night.
I remember that.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, the audience, that is George Tidwell in a little nutshell.
What did the audience say about it?
you only if you had never seen A Streetcar Named Desire, that would go right over your head. But yes,
Oh, that is.
I remember that title. Yeah.
I loved it. I that is a skill that I learned from the great Bill Justice. He was
Oh, yeah.
he was a king at slightly altering titles and performance instructions to make people come across them in a run through and just have to stop playing because they were laughing. It's a skill.
He said a phrase to me one time that I've never forgotten because it's so true. And I even use it when I do a seminar with kids that are asking me questions about becoming a musician. He said, you have to really kind of get their attention to convince them, like they already know how to play the piano or the guitar or whatever it is, and they think, this is wonderful. But they don't think to go back and see what people before them did.
Right.
And because he said, even Bach had some chords with a major seventh in them. And so he said, when these young kids come to Nashville and they know 4 chords and they've written a song, he said, if they hit a major seventh, they think they've struck oil. So he was trying to get them to just leave it at the door and keep learning, and listen to people who were their predecessors.
He was a guy that certainly generated some funny stuff. I don't know if you ever heard. There was a story about he was an A&R man at Sun Records when Sun Records was the deal.
Yeah.
And he had produced a lot of great records there, and people would come to him with an eye toward getting picked to be on the label after Elvis and things were really hot, and they had Johnny Cash and so forth, and they also had Jerry Lee Lewis, and
Oh yeah.
he told me, and there's no reason he would have made this up, that the really great piano player and singer Charlie Rich lived over in Arkansas at the time. I mean, this would be the early '60s.
Yeah.
And a great singer, great piano player, and he came in and to audition for Bill, and so he sat and played and sang what Bill said was just beautifully, like, you know, barroom blues, beautiful song and stuff. And Bill said, "I really love that, but that's not what we're after right now." And he gave him a 45 of the latest Jerry Lee Lewis record, and he said to Charlie Rich, "Go home and listen to this. When you can play this bad, come back." So certainly no offense to Jerry Lee Lewis fans, but
He was still playing saxophone when he came to town, and I worked in Carl Garvin's band with him as part of the saxophone section. And when I was working for Capitol Records as a secretary, and he had to bring a chart in or pay a bill for copying or whatever it was to the company, he would address them to me, but he would say, "Miss Junior Mance, Capitol Records, 17th Avenue." And I took it as a really good compliment.
he was great. I always wish Jeff had had a chance to really get to know him, because they would have certainly been
Oh, yeah,
kindred spirits for sure.
absolutely.
A funny man.
So, Jeff, I'm going to sneak off for 1 minute, but two other little ditties that George brought up was you playing bass in the Glenn Miller band and Maynard Ferguson's Gospel John. Do you guys discuss? George, help share your
I'll help
thoughts.
him discuss.
And I will be back in just a few minutes.
Well, you brought those up, George?
Well, I just
Those
kind of
points?
sent her a few things. As a trumpet player, I'm just so aware of how, even though Gospel John was written what you might call a while ago, it still comes up on the lists of trumpet players of all ages as their favorite Maynard record, favorite Maynard.
I don't think I've ever heard that.
So that's like a little niche in the world where Jeff is even more famous among the I know trumpet players.
I started taking piano lessons when I was about 6, and I hated practicing.
Mhm.
So obviously it didn't last. That was a mistake. I wish my parents would have sat on my head and just said, "Sit at that piano." But I played the piano, through those years. When I went into elementary school, for some God unknown reason, I wanted to play the trumpet. Now, who wants to play the trumpet? Who plays the trumpet? Nobody.
Exactly.
But I thought that
Like
would
you
be
back.
cool, and I realized years later the reason I wanted to play the trumpet is that I was in love with the smell of valve oil. That was the reason, and it really has a nice smell to it.
It's addictive.
Anyway, then I got into 7th grade. It was in the band I was playing. Then I got braces when I was 13 or 14. I couldn't play the trumpet anymore.
You're done.
I switched to sousaphone, and it'd be like me playing the sousaphone, especially in the marching band. And at that time, they were brass sousaphones. They weren't the fiberglass ones.
It weighed more than you.
I mean, it was like, Woody Allen carrying a Steinway piano on his back. I mean, it's and then I picked up the string bass so I could play in the stage band. And I realized, boy, I can actually play gigs if I play the string bass. So I really concentrated on that. So I was a bass player through my teens, and I started doing club dates when I was 13 or 14, playing bass, and got to know a lot of great musicians around Washington, some great piano players and great horn players, and with all the beautiful rooms around Washington to work, the bars and these hotels, and Washington D.C. is a lot like living in Europe,
Mhm.
because you hear 30 different languages before 10 o'clock in the morning if you walk out on the road there. So it was a very nice town to work in. So by the time I went to Berklee in 1965, I went up there as a bass player, and I realized that I couldn't do what I wanted to do in the music industry without being more proficient at the piano. So I switched my major. And then when I moved down here from Detroit, I still was playing bass while I was in Detroit on and off. But when I moved down here, I sold my basses and concentrated on just the piano, and writing is really what I've always wanted to do.
Right.
So I moved here in 1980. But while I was living in Detroit, there was a fabulous lady there who I loved dearly. She passed away some 3 or 4 years ago now, I guess, maybe a little longer, named Midge Ellis. And she was an administrator at the Schoolcraft High School in Livonia, Michigan, outside of Detroit. And she was a huge jazz lover. And she thought it would be a great idea to start bringing the big bands in to town on a regular basis so that people could, really enjoy that music. So she brought in the Basie band and Buddy Rich and Stan Kenton and Maynard's, and I mean all the bands on a kind of a rotating basis. Whenever they were in the area, she'd book a concert. Let me see your schedule for next year, and here's a slot while you're in the area. And Don Ellis's band came in. It was fabulous.
Very cool.
But through Midge, and Midge loved me because she knew my reputation around town with a couple of the bands that I wrote for there. And she introduced me to all the leaders. That's how I got the connection to Maynard and to Basie, and Kenton too. So I met Maynard first, and I said, "Can I write something for the band?" "Yeah, oh, sure." So I did, and that was Nice and Juicy. Actually, that was the first thing I wrote.
Yeah. Another classic, another much loved by the trumpet folks, by everybody.
The trumpet folks, they loved that stuff.
Yeah.
Because he had 5 trumpets, that's why it was trumpet heavy.
Okay.
And then Gospel John actually followed after that, and it's interesting that some of you bring up Gospel John. I just got a call last week from a band director in Florida that's missing some parts
Yeah.
to the original Maynard arrangement of Gospel John. So I had to kind of track that down, and I directed him where he could get those. But that's I'm dining out, as Bill Walker would say.
Exactly.
I'm not dining at Sperry's. I'm kind of going to Panera, but it still is dining out.
But you had a decent run from that.
I did. Yeah, I did.
That's good. I'd like to hear it.
Monica's back.
Never heard that.
You missed the fun.
And you did play bass on the Glenn Miller band.
I played Glenn. I went on the Miller band right out of school. I graduated at Berklee in '69 and had a 4-year deferment, which of course was up. So I got a note from my selective service agency in Washington D.C. Report to Washington.
Oh boy.
On the 7th of September of 1969 for your physical, and that was Vietnam days. And my lottery number was 95, so I didn't even want to mess with going to Vietnam.
No.
So I managed to have my physical transferred to Boston, which had the highest rejection rate in the country.
Oh, really?
So I thought that might have been a good idea. But anyway, I failed my physical because I have allergies and asthma, and I got documentation for that. So fortunately, I didn't have to go into any kind of field service. But I still was kind of eligible for the draft. And I had a position offered to me at the Naval School of Music in Virginia. But then I failed my physical, and I said, "Oh, great! I'm going to go get out of Boston." Like a week later, my buddy Jay Patton, who's a saxophone player and fabulous musician, writer, and music director for Crystal Gale since the early '80s when I came here. He said he was on the band, and he called me up and said, "There's a bass player just is leaving the band. You want to come on?" So I went on the band for about 6-8 months and moved to Detroit after that, and that's where I met Maynard and et cetera, et cetera. But I did record with the Miller Band at Royal Festival Hall. We did an album It was
Whoa.
quite a good album, actually,
Cool.
and that was a thrill.
That's cool.
And working with Buddy DeFranco was a thrill as well.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Which paid off nicely for you later when he played on your excellent jazz album.
That was fun. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Friends and Heroes is the name of the album.
Beautiful stuff.
It
Yeah.
can be purchased from your website, correct?
Can be purchased from me. I have, oh gee, I'm running low. I got 9,000 copies left. But
Everybody buy the album.
you can email me at rareairmusic.com and I'll get you a copy of that.
There
I
you
think
go.
Amazon has them as well. So,
Good. Good.
but George is on it, and actually, I had to use everybody I knew in Nashville, or else I couldn't walk around town.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was essentially all done live too.
Yeah, it was.
No, that's
It
neat.
was.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Now you were involved in the Jazz Machine as well. Is that correct?
When I moved here, I started writing for the Jazz Machine because that's kind of what you do when you move to a new town. Is you find the jazz guys,
Was
Yeah.
that
and
that
there's usually a rehearsal band going on. And
Yeah, Dave Converse.
sure,
Yeah.
Dave.
After-
And,
mm,
pardon me.
After he left, did you?
Well, I directed the band for a while. It wasn't a very long stint. They really didn't need a director, especially with George and Jim Williamson and those guys in the band.
oh yeah.
They could introduce a
Great
tune and
band.
count it off. You know, they didn't need to see me.
Yeah,
in front
I
of the
ended
band.
up being the theoretical leader of it, but Jeff is right. It was mostly a question of being the one willing to take the stands to the club and make the
Right.
phone calls.
Had the
Because
pies. You know.
yeah, because all the players were so self-sufficient in terms of
Oh yeah.
displaying great.
Sure. Well, but that was fun. That is the quickest way to meet all of the good players in town is
Yeah.
through the rehearsal bands,
Right.
and that's common in any city.
Yeah, and for them to get to know you, which we wanted to happen then for sure.
I'm happy to say it worked out.
Okay, so Jeff, you have written for obviously tons of albums, musicians, live symphony dates, but you also do a lot of television and movie work. So how did you get into that?
Because I've always loved that. That has always been my first love. I still now believe some of the best music on this earth has been written for the film world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
If you look, and it's not just John Williams, to take nothing away from John Williams, who is obviously the godfather of the genre now at 90 years old.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's still working. His current project, or at least it was before the COVID thing, was West Side Story.
Yeah.
Steven
Oh
Spielberg.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the music, the genre in general, has produced some of the most fabulous music ever written under pressure, or even not under pressure.
Yeah.
But when you consider the very short turnarounds on a lot of the major films through the years, what these composers have come up with is incredible.
Yeah.
And I've always, and I think this is true of most arrangers and composers. That's something we all strive to do, because that is it's a very demanding, exacting. Is that motorcycle in my house? Or?
It's in my front yard.
Surprise.
It's a very exacting art form on everyone's part. The composer, the orchestrator, the copyist, the contractors, the players themselves, the engineers, and it's exhilarating. I mean, it really is a really exhilarating endeavor to write music for any film. And I've done some smaller things. I've ghosted some things. I have not done a Hollywood blockbuster, which you really have to live in Hollywood, to do that. And I had the choice of moving to LA or moving to Nashville, and I chose Nashville for quite a few reasons. one of the main reasons was because my friends that lived in LA were calling me in Detroit asking for work at that time, and it was a little weird.
Oh,
So,
come here.
but
You made the right choice for sure.
Yeah,
well,
you did.
I think I did, and also the music, the music industry that I really loved was kind of over by the 70s. There was still a lot of great film music being written, and obviously the resurgence, um, prompted by John Williams, I think, in the early 80s with
Right.
Indiana Jones and all that, big orchestra scores again.
Yeah.
Um, Mostly what I've done have been documentaries, and I had some excellent clients over the years. One in various cities, but primarily in St. Louis and Washington D.C. And I got quite a few projects from them. Things like museum pieces, and I did a piece for the uh, postal service once, which needs some help again right now. But that was it was showcasing how incredibly complex a business that really is,
Yeah.
and it was a fascinating thing. And I did a lot of things for John Deere and McDonald Douglas and those kind of companies when they were actually doing corporate presentations. When that was in vogue, it isn't much anymore. And it was really prior to film producers, corporate film producers using library music.
Yeah.
So when they were actually doing original music, I mean, I've been fortunate to write some really good directors and some nice projects. Writing for films actually was an extension of what I was doing in radio and television advertising, mostly in Detroit. Um, uh, I did some things down here. Um, McDonald Douglas actually was one that I remember that George was on.
Yeah.
A lot of the players here were on that date, and that was simultaneous recording, which I love. But what's happened recently is, um, unless first of all, obviously the small screen now, Netflix, Amazon Video, etc., has become what Hollywood used to be. You don't really need to go through a major motion picture company to
Yeah.
release a project anymore. I mean, Scorsese and Robert De Niro did The Irishman because Netflix said, "Please come and do a movie for us." And here's the checkbook. What do you want? I mean, why should they say no? We're going to hold out for Paramount. They're
Right.
not going to do that. So, on the small screen, really, unless you have the show actually demands a regular composer to do an extended episodic series, it's very difficult to get your music into that genre. Um, and you really have to be connected with somebody involved in those productions. The good news is for composers around the world now, you don't have to live in Hollywood or New York in order to score a film.
Yeah.
Some of the best writers now are from Iceland and Finland and Scandinavia and Tokyo. I mean, there's writers from all over now writing the scores for a lot of these programs.
Yeah.
What I had done over the last couple of years is I've written a lot of library cues, which still people draw from for television shows, but more and more people are actually hiring composers now to actually do their shows. Especially if you cut a deal with Netflix or with Amazon or with Prime Video or whatever the production company is, they put together a package deal and get a budget from Netflix, and
Yeah.
they do the series, and they hire their own people, and normally they will hire a specific composer for that. So what happens is you kind of have to wait for the individual independent projects to come along. Somebody like myself now, because I'm not really soliciting that work anymore, because it's very difficult to get into. B, my clients that used to do that aren't doing it anymore, and is also C, which may be a young group of musicians now are coming in, taking advantage of all the technology available, and in 3 or 4 hours can come up with some incredible stuff
Yeah.
Yeah.
for episodic TV. So Randy Newman said something to me once that was really interesting. Actually, he didn't. We had a discussion about this. I worked with him with the National Symphony in the early 2000s, and he was just about to score. He had just scored Seabiscuit. That was the time. That was the time period. And I was talking to him because I love his music and his film scores in particular. But he was saying, he said, I have to call. As I said, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I got to call my orchestrator, who was Jack Hayes, who was a fabulous orchestrator, to do thus and such. Thank you for reminding me. And he said, Jack sometimes doesn't return my calls because he's so old now. My point is that everybody that really did that in what I call the golden day of film music, golden age of film music, they were kind of getting older. The younger writers, James Newton Howard and James Horner and Hans Zimmer and all those incredible people, the music has changed, the demographic has changed, the way people get their movies has changed.
Yeah.
And what's unfortunately happened is that melody has kind of gone the way of the horse and buggy. Melody is really out of style now. If you write a cue with a lot of melodies in it, it doesn't usually get placed because it's almost like it's passé. It's mostly a feel thing. It's a Hans Zimmer actually created a term. It's called sound worlds. When he watches a rough cut or even a final cut of a movie that he's going to score, he decides what the sound world will be for that particular project. And that means what type of instruments I'm going to use, what type of percussion I'm going to use. Am I going to use a conventional string section, or is it going to be more electronic sounding string? Those kind of considerations. So what he does is that becomes the key for the film, as opposed to an Indiana Jones, where those themes, or Star Wars, or any of the great John Williams things, or a lot of those composers wrote melodic films content to their scores.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the present. With the incredible sample libraries you can buy now, you can write so much great music, whether it contains melodies or not. I'm actually composing a lot of classical music now for my own publishing company. And normally you have to do mock-ups, for either a client or for publishing purposes. And what you can get from the sample libraries now is scary. It's absolutely frightening how good it can be. Now, it takes some work to do that. You could go in and do it in an hour and a half with a live orchestra and be done with it. But writing an orchestral piece for sample libraries, it takes days to do that. Wow. But it's credible. The music is very credible.
Yeah.
Good.
So I kind of went off on a couple of tangents there, but I
and then on the more commercial side of TV, Jeff, I know you've written hundreds of. You got 30 minutes. Write me a great TV chart in our many years of episodic weekly TV.
Yeah,
and that's a whole nother skill.
Yeah, that's you just kind of get used to it. Like anything else in music, the more you're doing it, the easier it is for you. If you lay off for 6 months, it's going to take you a long time to get the trumpet back in your face comfortably, or even the keyboard, or as a singer, or as a writer. It's the same way.
I think a lot of people are finding that out right now, actually, how hard it is to get back on the horse, so to speak.
It is.
But how creative people are being.
Yeah.
If you watch something, I saw a performance by the BBC Orchestra 3, 4, 5 months ago that they all did. It was I forgot what the piece was. It was a classical piece, but they were all at their homes.
Yeah.
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 And they
Amazing.
just overdubbed their parts, and it was
Yeah.
incredible.
The Afro-Cuban Jazz Orchestra from Berklee is doing that, and they're doing it on a regular basis, and they're all over the world, and they're, onion layering
Yeah.
the work, and I'm absolutely astonished and how fantastic it sounds, and they still sound like they're in a room together, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
if
It-
any of them are in the same room recording, it just blows.
It is amazing stuff, but I will say, I think every one of those people, like all of us, still yearn for the days when you can
We look forward to
touch the shoulder of the other player next to you,
Right.
because that's
so many reasons. For so many reasons, that interaction,
Yeah.
the unspeakable, the energy
yeah.
that you feel from one another being in a room, you just can't. Audience or musicians, whatever the case is, that's irreplaceable. But
This,
But you guys are right that if it's do that or don't do anything,
you got
obviously all the other great stuff that's happening is
It always-
inspiring.
it always, I always think of this virtual music collaborative effort that's going on now as kissing someone through a screen door. You know,
Yeah,
you're there, you see them. It's
And-
almost organic,
No.
but I mean, but you still want to do it again. You still
Yeah.
want to be there doing it.
yeah.
Now, also, I think there's a website for that too, Jeff. I'm not
There
sure.
is, I'll guarantee you, there's a website, for everything. Cat hairballs, the hairball website. I mean, I can guarantee it.
Speaking of cats and hairballs,
Where are the cats tonight? They've been
Yeah,
long.
they're being awfully quiet. I don't.
Dover is standing or sitting in front of the front door. We have some stray cats that come in and come to the porches and get
They're
food
community
at night. And we have a skunk and a raccoon that also comes,
Nice.
Oh, and a possum.
and a possum. Yeah.
Is it Al? Is it Al McGuire who has a kind of alternate Facebook thing called
Yeah.
Cat? What do they call?
Yeah.
Feral, like
Feral.
Feral Martha's name. Feral Cats, Katz.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've got several.
He's a funny guy.
In Jacksonville.
Well, this is my fault. I am a huge animal. Well, I think we're all animal lovers on here.
Yeah.
And I have community cats at my house, and I've done a lot of research and ways to help them and protect them. And if I had my way, they would all just come in and live in my house with me, but they don't seem to like that idea. So I have been creative in providing shelter
great,
and food and
They're
everything.
kind of nomads.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
brought the idea over to
They
me.
want to be
Now they're
outside.
all coming over here and eating her food too and everything. So
Yeah.
We're just being
And
the-
my two cats, who don't go outside, when they see them at either door, they sit there and go, "Come on in."
let me show you around.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to
That's funny.
we have a video, we have a clip, and I want to show this. So Jeff, if you'll set this up a little bit, this is Westworld, and speaking of the television scoring movie world, can you set this up a little bit? and we'll
Sure.
do this for everyone.
I wish I could say I was given the Westworld account, but that's not the case. Westworld is the TV, it's HBO actually series, and in collaboration with a software, a music software library company called Spitfire Audio, is in London, and they make fabulous products. I mean, their products are incredible. In collaboration with Spitfire, HBO authorized them to use a chase scene from a Westworld episode, and they opened it up to a worldwide scoring competition. And I was one of the entrants, and I think it wound up being 11,000 composers
Wow.
sent in.
Wow.
And the staff from the Westworld production company was going to judge these things, and whoever the winner was would get all of the software that this Spitfire Audio offers, which is about $20,000 worth of software, et cetera, et cetera. Full disclosure, I did not win first prize. I didn't even place. But with 11,000 entries, you know that the music was overall
amazing.
pretty spectacular. Yeah. Actually, there's a lot of controversy about the actual winner, but that's a story for another time. But so this was my entry, and what it is a 4-minute chase scene, and they said, "Here, go ahead, go for it, and write something,
cool.
and send it in." So.
Well,
I did.
It's fantastic, and it's very fun. And if I were a judge, you would have won. I didn't.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. But so this is Jeff Steinberg's Westworld chase scene entry, and let's watch it.
Good.
Stand by. Got it.
Verified. Enable semi-automatic control. Disable safety features. Maximum speed. Go. What's happening to me?
I think he's switching genres.
We need distance. Head south.
Is that a standard issue?
No. It's not. Point and shoot. Police ahead. Maintain speed. Sharp left. Now.
I missed.
Hold on. All right, I need you. Drop in, intersect, maximum speed. Arm charges now. Accelerate.
Acceleration at 90%.
More.
94%.
More.
98%.
Stop.
Why the f are we stopping?
Get down.
and my heart went with you. I speak your